Good afternoon. Thanks for coming out this afternoon. I know that there are so many events taking place all over the campus, but this is a very special one to me. My name is Pat Thomas. I teach health and medical journalism at the University of Georgia's Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication. So pleased to see so many of my colleagues and students here today. The author Harriet Washington is very special to me. She and I met 20 years ago when we were both at the Harvard Medical School. She was on a fellowship there, and I edited the Harvard Health Letter. We connected then, and we've been friends ever since. The last time that she was at the University of Georgia, she was touring behind her remarkable first book, Medical Apartheid, which won a slew of awards, including the National Book Critics Circle Best Nonfiction of the Year Award. We're so pleased to bring her back this year, touring with her second book. And I want to thank all the people that have made her visit possible. The University of Georgia Office of Diversity, the graduate programs at Grady College, the Professional in Residence program for the journalism department, and my own graduate program in health and medical journalism. Harriet is a journalist who morphed into an author who gained an international reputation as a medical ethicist. She is a moral thinker. She is a voice that we need to hear in the public dialogue. And on a practical level, she helps explain to us why medicine works the way it does and why it all costs so much. So let's welcome Harriet Washington.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right. Thank you so much, Pat. And I give my heartfelt thanks to the university for bringing me here yet again. In more ways than one, coming here always feels a bit like coming home. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. I have a lot to say to you today, and I'm not actually going to get to all of it. That's my pattern. But I just want to caution you that if I should skip over a slide as I'm speaking, and it's something that you're really fascinated by, be sure to ask a question about it during the Q&A section. I also am not in the habit of reading my slides. You're academics. You can read them for yourselves. I'm much more interested in touching upon things that hopefully will galvanize you and add a little more depth to what you can read on the slides. And that said, I want to talk to you a bit about my most recent work, which is actually a critique of American medicine, but it's a multi-layered critique. What I'm principally concerned about is the ethical and moral consequences of big corporations' alliances with medicine. Although they may or may not have been well-intentioned, the consequences, seen and unforeseen, have been disastrous for American medicine, for all of us, and I hope to illuminate exactly why. I like data, so I'm going to try to illuminate why by showing you both case histories and figures to show you why things in medicine might not be exactly the way they appear. They might not be reflected terribly accuracy, either in the conventional news media or in medical journalism itself, including peer-reviewed medical journals. But first, I want to go back in time a little bit and think about what medicine once was. I'm not pretending that there's any kind of halcyon golden age of medicine during which there was no venality and there was no grasping after money, but I am going to say that the culture of medicine once looked very different. It looked very different from corporate culture. There's probably no better illustration of that than the fight against polio, which I'm actually old enough to remember. I remember the March of Dimes. I remember, as a student, coming to school every fall, and we had apprehension about who would not be there, what desks would be empty. There were always kids missing, and those kids often had polio. And when I got a fever or a chill or a stomach ache, my parents' first thought was always, oh my God, I hope it's not polio. Polio, in many ways, occupied the area of culture that AIDS occupies today. It was a scourge, it was mysterious, it was selectively carrying off parts of the population, and we were hell-bent on trying to come up with an answer to it, and we did. Not one, but two answers, actually. When Salk devised his vaccine, he appeared on Murrow's show, See It Now, and Murrow asked him, Why? What are you going to do now? You have this vaccine. Everybody's going to want it. The demand's going to be incredible. And someone's going to make a lot of money on this, right? So who holds the patent? And Salk said, the American people, I think. Could you patent the sun? This was not unusual. This was the overriding mentality in American medical research culture, a feeling that grubbing after money, seeking profits, seeking to maximize profits from patents on biologically active molecules and medicines was not really a noble enough calling for research. It was not what research was all about. Research was very interesting in that it required a long, arduous course of study. And it attracted very brilliant people. It was very competitive, it was very difficult, and yet it didn't pay very well. These people were not motivated by money. They were motivated by fame, intellectual competition. They wanted to be seen as benefactors. That was important to them. They wanted to win prizes. These were all the motivations that drove them, and it drove them very well. Under this modality, we actually came up with a lot of answers to our medical crises. Penicillin was found to cure syphilis and other STDs, streptomycin. I mean, of course, the polio vaccine. Many, many important medications were devised by researchers who were not concerned about money. They worked in universities, and universities themselves were very different. Universities and corporations could not have looked more different. Corporations sought to maximize and still seek to maximize their profits. Universities were actually centers of science in the public interest. They were centers of research that was squarely focused on the ills of society, be they medical, social, whatever, and it attracted people who were drawn to that role. The university had a unique role, actually, in pursuing the public interest, and that was true of medical research as well. In fact, there were laws and regulations that banned universities from using the discoveries that were made with government subsidies. They could not license them to corporations. They could not sell them to corporations in most cases. So there was this very, very clear impermeable membrane between corporations and universities. It's not there anymore. I'm going to talk about what happened when it dissolved. So one of the consequences, although maybe not the most important consequence, is the cost of medications. I think I noted here that when Medicare and Medicaid were finally passed in the 60s, it's very interesting, there was no provision there for the cost of medications. There's no provision for helping the elderly and the infirm and poor pay for their drugs. Why? Because drugs were so cheap. It wasn't needed. Drugs were cheap because university researchers working in universities devised them. They were then marketed, and there was a real animus against profiting. In fact, I remember Selman Waksman had a hard time when he actually sold his patent to a university. He then begged it back because he was afraid of what people would think if they knew that he had sold his drug to a profit-making company. So drugs were cheap. They're not cheap anymore. There was also high innovation. If you look in the past at figures, you will find that depending on the year, there was a trend where hundreds of drugs were devised every single year. Hundreds of new drugs. And yet there was a mentality among corporations and among the legislators to whom they were whispering that that wasn't enough because there were lots and lots of medically active molecules that were not being made into drugs. Many, thousands of them, as a matter of fact. And so there rose an animus that we have all these patents on drugs lying fallow. No one's doing anything with them. We need to have hospitals and medical centers partner with corporations so we can develop all these drugs that are lying fallow. Birch Bayh was a senator from Indiana, and Birch Bayh was a senator who listened, and he began complaining on the floor of Congress that we've got 28,000 patents made in universities that are not being developed. They're just lying there, collecting dust. We spent $30 billion collecting. $30 billion, $1980, by the way. And so Birch Bayh sought to convince his fellow senators and congressmen that we need a law to ease the cooperation of universities and private corporations. He was successful, but he was successful under a very strange pattern because initially the law was voted down. Initially, Congress wanted no part of it, and more importantly, very powerful Senator Russell Long was against it. So Following his lead, senators voted it down. But even though he lost, Birchby went on to lose the election. It was not a good year for him. And Jimmy Carter was a lame duck.